and Secretary Summer Soares. Alongside me is Debonair, Vice Chair John Y. Hay Jr. I want to acknowledge all the bot staff for assisting our team in operations, for helping us get our lunches and to run smoothly all of the administrative stuff so that we have all these presentations set before you trustees, and they did an excellent job in getting these booklets put together. I also like to acknowledge, besides myself, the Board of Trustees for all being here through these briefings, because it's quite different and new, but I think we've all are learning something about what each of our department heads go through and what they prepare on the daily for our OHA to function at the highest level possible. Right now, we'd like to go on with our roll call, please, Pohai.
Trustee Ahuna, excused. Trustee Akina.
Aloha Wednesday.
Trustee Akaka.
Ill.
Trustee Galuteria. Trustee Kahele.
Present.
Trustee Lindsay. Trustee Souza. Vice Chair Waihe'e.
Present.
Chair Lapa.
Present.
8 trustees present. Is Trustee Lindsay online? No. 7 right now.
I don't
Okay.
see her. Yep. Okay, all right, mahalo. All right, at this time, we'd like to continue our briefings. I like to call it this time, well, at the time now of our start of our meetings is 9:10 a.m. And just a reminder again for our trustees to ensure that your microphone is right near your mouth so we can hear you for recording purposes. As for public testimonies, the following rules apply so that we are all respectful of everyone who are wanting to participate today. Public testimony should be limited to matters listed only on the meeting agenda and will occur prior to any listed items conclusion or vote. If you begin to address other issues not on today's meeting agenda, the BF chair will call you out of order and direct you to limit your testimony to the items listed on the agenda. Our testifiers' mics should be unmuted, and it will be unmuted when it is your turn to testify. If you're not audible, you will be muted and the next testifier will be called. Oral testimony online will be allotted 5 minutes. Your mic will be automatically muted once you have completed your oral testimony, or if your allotted time for testimony expires. Please log off after testifying. At this time, Pohai, I'd like to ask if there are any testifiers this morning.
There are no testifiers at this time.
Okay, I'd like to call upon our COO, Kihaupuu, at this time, so she can introduce herself and her staff joining us today.
Mahalo e ka luna ho'omalu aloha ka kahiaka kako. Joining us from administration today, both online and in person, we have Chief Financial Officer Ramona Hink, Financial Analyst Grace Chen, Interim Corporation Counsel Everett Ota, Interim Director of Land Assets Lori Walker, and with her, we have Leanne Gentry, Commercial Property Agent, La'akea Reeves, Legacy Land Agent, Kione Odroid, Legacy Land Agent, and Ardina Sarinan, HLID Coordinator. I believe she'll be joining us later. We also have Daniel Santos and Arlene Aguinaldo, our IT System Engineer and Administrators. Mahalo.
Mahalo ka punui. At this time, today's presentation is on item C, trustees, item C, and this is what's on our agenda today. Wednesday, May 21st, 2025, 9 a.m. Our presentation by OHA Administration will be about our budget briefings for the proposed Biennium Budget for fiscal year 2026-2027, budgets of the Land Assets Division related to the management and operations of OHA commercial lands, including Nalamakukui, Ibile Harbor Shops, and Kaka'ako and legacy lands, including Hawaii Vaukele Opuna, Maui Palauea, Oahu, Wahiawa, Ku'ukaniloko, Pahua Heiau, Wailua Courthouse, Halava, Luku Interpretive Development Program sites, Kauai 4531, Kuamo'o Road, Kapa'a, Ke Kaha Armory. And now Kapunui, I'd like to turn it over to you for our presenters.
Mahalo nui. So I'm going to ask our Interim Land Assets Director, Lori Walker, to come, and she will be leading the presentations from our Land Assets Division this morning.
Good morning.
Aloha, good morning. Good morning, Chair and members of the board. Whew. Thank you. We want to express our gratitude for this very new opportunity to share about our work at a level of detail that is new to us, and we appreciate your investment in our work. We also want to express that there is a lot of anxiety that comes with this brand new process. And so we appreciate your patience with answers that we don't fully have today. And we're absolutely going to work to follow up and provide that following the presentation. We're not at that slide yet, but I do want to go over some things. Our PAYA is, as you will see, very unique, and I don't mean this affectionately right now. I do have a lot of affection for our team, but our presentation will be broken up by programs and property groupings because we actually have 13 budgets that we manage. And so we will do this so that we can clearly speak to our budget request and give time in between so that we can ask questions specific to, as they come up, to specific to the property groupings. So the ka'ina will be chunked into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish mini presentations. But I'll start with our overview. This slide. Okay, so as Chair Alapash mentioned, land assets is responsible for the operations and management of all commercial or investment lands and legacy lands in OHA's portfolio. We also support, as you know, due diligence for potential acquisitions of in expanding our portfolio. Legacy Lands Program is responsible for managing over 26,000 acres of land, as you mentioned, while Keleopuna on Hawaii Island, Palauea Cultural Preserve on Maui, Pahua Heiau in Mauna Lua, Oahu, Wahewa, surrounding Kukani Loko, Waialua Courthouse, Kekaha Armory, and Ho'omana. On Kauai, our responsibility is to protect and preserve natural and cultural resources and facilitate programmatic uses on these lands. HLID, or Halavaluluku Interpretive Development Program, is a sub-program of our Legacy Lands Program, and the kuleana there is to facilitate the mitigation of adverse impacts of the construction of the H3 interstate highway. And our commercial properties program, of course, is responsible for the maintenance and management of all of our investment lands. Kaka'akumakai, Nalamakukui, our Iwilei properties, Honolulu Harbor Shops, and Iwilei Business Center. And the kuleana there is primarily to generate revenue to support our programs. Next slide, please. I'll just speak in summary about this really quickly. This is our alignment to OHA's mandate. All of our programs support, all of our activities support in some way our mandate. And in general, our efforts reflect OHA's fiduciary duty under HRS Chapter 10 to manage our resources, our real property resources, for the betterment of Native Hawaiians and Hawaiians. Next slide. And this is an overview of our alignment to our Mana'i Mauliola strategic priorities. AINA is one of the 3 strategic foundations, and it also is represented in each of the 4 strategic directions. So we have impacts on not every single outcome, but each outcomes in each of the 4 of the directions. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we'll spend a little bit of time here. This is our current organizational structure within our PAYA. We have 3 legacy land agent positions, La'akea Raves and Keone Oldroyd, who will join me join us later, are fill two of those positions, and one of those positions was recently vacant. They were primarily responsible for our Waukeleopuna Forest Preserve on Hawaii Island. And Halavaluluku Interpretive Development Coordinator position, Ardina Saranen, our commercial property agent. We have two commercial property agent positions, one filled by Leanne Gentry, and then the other is vacant. My permanent title is Integrated Assets Manager, so I oversee both programs, all three programs. In my interim role, I oversee the department, and I have as Director of Resource Management Land Assets in the interim, as that position is vacant as well. And we have an administrative assistant, Kahelelani Kiavekane, and our Paya reports directly to Kapohana Stacy Rara. Okay. And you all have this in your materials, so I just want to kind of speak to some of the details. The first column there just really details the alignment slide that we showed in slide 4 with some of the work that we do. Commercial property management, of course, funds the programs that achieve the outcomes, and help. And some of our activities under that program help to leverage our spaces for Hawaiian programs and some of our outcomes. And then a lot of our legacy work facilitates connection and relationship to Aina. And so that is a key alignment with our strategic plan and outcomes. A couple of our key goals and objectives identified for this biennium includes maximizing leasing under commercial property, exemplary master and management planning in both programs, ecosystem restoration in legacy. We definitely want to work on we're prioritizing prudent property acquisition through our land transfer projects that are underway. We are targeting closing out this HLID project within this biennium. And that is an over 30-year project that will be a momentous accomplishment for our organization and for the communities that impacts. We are also we plan to continue leveraging grant funding, and we would like to focus more specifically on departmental and operational improvements. And one specific legacy land goal that we have is to strengthen our co-stewardship models and the work that we do with our communities. Some commercial programs. We have a couple property improvement projects that we're going to work on this year, incorporating more values-based commercial property partnerships. And then also for legacy, we have a few reforestation projects and community engagement and land stewardship projects that we are focusing on. And then there's a non-exhaustive list of some metrics that we identified for how we measure our success in these areas. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so for our PAIA, because we have so many budgets and very distinct programs, we wanted to lay out a table for a one-look visual of the comparison between programs across expense categories, so that you can kind of just see with one look how different each of the programs function. The total there, we excluded the personnel amounts because we know that those are going to change, and we just wanted to give you a clear baseline of our budget ask. And then the note at the bottom, we'll probably return to that several times throughout this presentation, but just want to note that the totals in each of the categories include recoverable and or reimbursable expenses. And we'll speak to them specifically as we go through the programs. And so just keep that in mind. Okay. I also want to share that the totals on this table, they represent an array of source funding. Like I mentioned, there's recoverable and reimbursable expenses. So commercial, all of our activities and the spending limit itself are determined by the revenue that is generated on the properties and in that program. So it's fully funded through the revenue that it generates. For legacy, at one point, a portion of the commercial property revenue funded the legacy budget. And I think we will revisit to clarify that, but some of the properties are funded by the core budget. Some of the properties are funded through a property specific agreement. And then we also have grant funding and donations that are funding our activities as well. And then HLID is 100% externally funded. HDOT and Federal Highways fund that program. Okay. Next slide, thank you. Okay, so we will just speak briefly to these kind of summary slides of each of our programs and then just open up for discussion and questions. The first budget to speak to is the director's budget, 8,100. The totals are there for both FY 26 and 27. The contracts personnel is subject to change, of course, and I believe that represents the director position, the manager position, and the administrative assistant for both fiscal years. And then under contracts, two major contracts that we are planning for or currently working with include the real estate consultant services. This contract is actually shared between our PAIA, with SNI PAIA, and then also BOT uses these services, but the budget itself resides in ours. And then we also would like to have a grant writer to support continuing to write and manage grants for our property operations. For equipment, this was a placeholder to acknowledge that our program's function really requires the attention and the presence of our staff outside of normal business hours, because we literally manage fires, we manage roof leaks and flooding, and these are things that our team have to be on site for. And so this is a placeholder. It may or may not go in this expense category, and so we'll have to reconcile that afterwards, but just wanted to call this forth so that we understand kind of the broad expectation for our staff to be available to attend to these matters. Property management really is a largely unpredictable function. We can't predict a lot of things on the commercial side, and we can predict them to a degree of accuracy, and that's how we generate these budgets. But it is very normal to have to adjust our budgets throughout the fiscal and biennium. Okay, and then some departmental improvement items there under program, and then my travel budget, which is subject to change given the results of our BOT meeting last week, telework and as well as the hiring of the director position will probably impact that budget as well. I just wanted to pause here if there are any land assets director specific questions, or I can continue to the general legacy lands budget as well, and then we can open it up.
Go ahead,
for
yeah,
questions.
just continue on.
Okay. So for legacy lands, we have a general programmatic budget that supports as needed across all of our properties. And the personnel there should be for 3 legacy land agents. The contracts include, this is more of a placeholder. This would be a reimbursed expense, USGS stream monitoring services for Waimea Valley. That is a reimbursed expense through Hi'ipaka. And then we do comprehensive we are planning to do comprehensive management plans and planning. This includes updating existing plans that we currently have to optimize our performance and generating plans for properties that we don't have them yet. And then the phase 2 due diligence, this was approved by this board earlier this year, and we will be putting that funding into this upcoming biennium budget. And then we have a figure for compliance contingency. This contingency is again for unforeseen kind of emergencies or events that happen, like if the heiau at Pahua is damaged and we didn't plan for that. This kind of helps us with compliance and regulatory requirements that we have to meet in order to address those issues. And then for equipment, these are some projects that I think this opportunity to share our budget with you will help us to discuss as an organization how we want to proceed with these projects. At Ho'omana, there is and La'akea can help to speak to details, but at Ho'omana, we have a responsibility to replace the cesspool at the property, which is at sea level. And so we've been speaking to vendors about what a design would cost for that and the sensitivity of that, where at the sea level, there are more probability, as you know, for EV to be exposed. And so that increases the cost of the work to design and to implement that replacement. At Kekaha, we did a property condition assessment last year, and it yielded a few fire and life safety improvements that we would like to address for that school. And then a small amount for field equipment that we see in order to do some of our maintenance projects. And then under program, we have a Hawaii Conservation Alliance dues. We've been a member for probably 8 to 10 years now. It precedes my tenure in the land department. And Keone can help speak to the number of subcommittees that we are on. We are on the Alliance Steering Committee, which helps to determine the direction of the annual conservation conference. And we also have honorarium in there. It's a small amount, but I know that we discussed kind of centralizing that in our administration budget. And then we have professional development, that's PD there for our agents. And then planning software subscription. I will share that going through this process also helped us to identify some errors that may have been and duplications that may be in the preliminary budget draft that was distributed. And then travel again for for our team under legacy. Okay. Any questions at this time?
Trustees, anything?
Okay. So we'll start with our Wahiawa Lands Kukani local property. This one is pretty involved. Major contract expenses there include an update to this CMP, including a complex agricultural feasibility study to update our master plan. And then, sorry, excuse me, CMP can at Kukani Local refers to a conceptual master plan, which this board has seen and approved. Updating that helps us to realize some of the more conceptual ideas and be able to implement them on the ground. And one of those concepts is the agriculture activity on the property, which this ag feasibility study will support. The equipment budget really is about the maintenance and management and stewardship of the 511 acres plus the 5 acres that the birthstones are on, and then travel for any needed support there. As you all are probably familiar, we received a grant from the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program within the Department of Defense. And the award, the application was for just around $8 million, but the award for the first year of our grant is 2.24 million. And so the 1.47 that you see there is the second installment. We did a realignment to include the first installment in our FY25 budget so we can start the programs. And we are anticipating through reapplication continued funding for subsequent years. We also recently were granted awarded a federal grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture for stewardship, Forest Services grant, and that was in the amount of $500,000, part of which we are delegating for Waukeleo-Puna. So the amount you see here is delegated for projects at for the Iulumai Ka'ulula'au project at Kukani Local or at Wahiawa. And then the remainder of that award we'll see that in Waukeleo-Puna. Okay. Any discussion at Wahiawa?
Trustee Akaka?
Regarding these contracts, and I'm looking on page 70 of the preliminary biennium budget details one. Starting from lines 2999 on down. So that caught my eye, and then you mentioning about these contracts regarding grants and so forth. So we are receiving federal grants, and what is the probability in this not continuing it being cut? Or is it because it's already in place that we don't have to worry about that because of what's happening in the Department of Ag and Defense?
Do you want to speak to this? Keone's been managing our grant applications and the conversations with all of the funders, so I just want to give
the big chair. Mahalo, Ori, mahalo, chair, mahalo,
Mahalo.
trustees. So it is a very good question. At the beginning of this year, we did sort of a review of all the grant fundings and contacted our managers of those awards to try and get a sense for the likelihood that funding would be canceled. I think our REPI funds are safe. And in fact, year one of that funding, has already been awarded. We have our notice to proceed. And so we're just going through the process right now of invoicing for that. Department of Defense spending is a good bucket to pull from. The USDA Forest Service grant was subject to a 90-day pause and review. And we're not sure what the result of that is yet, but we're close to executing an MOA with DOFA for that funding, and they're still moving through that process. So our sense is that they are optimistic. And then there's, we and Lori spoke to our need for a grant writer and a grant manager earlier. I think even in the midst of the current federal funding environment, there's still many opportunities that we're being sent constantly. We just applied for another grant through another funder, and so I think there's opportunity, even if some awards are canceled, to replace those with other opportunities. And then we're also trying to be aware of not getting too far ahead in the spending, so relying less on spending the money and then reimbursing it with the grant fund, and more on advancing the funds from the grant, so that we don't end up paying for a bunch of stuff that ultimately we're not able to recoup the cost on.
So just to get an overhead amount, how much are we receiving from federal funding?
Currently awarded for REPI is 2.24 million. Currently awarded for USDA is 500,000. So what is that? 2.7
In legacy.
in legacy.
Specifically just in legacy land management.
We are closing out another one. That was 300 and something thousand, but that's sort of rolling into activity.
So if we didn't have them at all, how much would that affect us? How long have we been receiving these funds? Is this a newer thing?
Yeah,
Because I have no idea.
the
about
REPI
this.
and the USDA funding
Yeah.
is brand new. Yeah, REPI was awarded last year, and then we've been going through the process of wrapping up planning and then drawing those funds down.
Okay. So if we weren't to have any of these funds, if they were to be pulled, if they were to be dissolved, how much would that affect us? Or
I think we would need to make a decision about what efforts we might want to continue with OHA funding, but I think we're in a position where we could just not move forward with those projects.
what can you give some insight into what these projects are?
Yes, absolutely. So for the if we could go back one slide. Do I control that? Okay. Yeah. So there on the bottom, the REPI grant is to fund the vegetation continuum portion of our conceptual master plan for the property, which includes all of the vegetation activities, inclusive of agriculture, reforestation, et cetera. And so this grant will specifically fund a cultural practitioners forest, where people can come and gather for hale building, for la'au lapa'au, lei planting, hula, seed orchards to help with wildfire recovery and revegetation of the remainder of this property, reforestation plots.
And this is specifically
Yes. Most of this funding is for Wahiawa. That's what we applied for that award. With the exception of about 77,000 for Waukele, which you'll see later, which is largely for fencing to protect some of our sensitive vegetation there.
So I just want to add that, so this team did come a few months ago to do the update during our ILM committee meeting about Kukani Local, and talked about the conceptual master plan as well as the REPI grant. And then I want to reiterate that they have already drawn down some of these funds and are getting ready to invoice, do your second invoice, right?
The, yeah, because of the timeline, we realigned a certain amount of the funding into the fiscal year 25 budget, but we haven't drawn any of those funds down. We're invoicing the DoD currently.
Thank you.
I will say, like, not just based on this, but even for Papahano, Mokuakea, and NOAA, the federal agencies that we've been working with have been also, like, of course, hyper aware of the impacts of the current administration. So in working with them, they too are trying to hurry up and, pay out on funds, so that, we're not subject to the risk of losing that funding.
And how many grant writers do we have? This is all outsourced. Oh, okay.
It's all internal, but it is, it's a lot to put these applications together, and it's even more to kind of manage them after the fact. And I actually think we're leaving money on the table without a dedicated person. I think there's opportunity for that position or that capacity to make much more money than we would spend on them.
So you're saying we need a grant writer within the lands division?
I think that particularly in the federal climate, we want to make sure that our practices around leveraging grants are sort of streamlined and established, so that before we establish a position, I think eventually we would probably like there to be a permanent position. We know that just in general, legacy lands are resource suckers. They don't generally generate their own revenue. And so grant funding is one of the ways that we're trying to sustain our properties without drawing either from commercial or from our core budget. It's been successful. In the last 6 years, I think we've been awarded 5 grants, and and 3 of those have been in the last year or 2. And so the practice, we haven't had a grant writer, but the amount of our grants that we're seeking now is increasing. And so we definitely want to dedicate more time, and we want to see how it works with a contracted grant writer, because it may be part-time, and we can kind of regulate the hours there. But eventually, if grant leveraging becomes a primary source of how we fund our program, we definitely would want to look into more grant writer.
Have we had a grant writer within the lands department before?
No, it's one of the hats that our team kind of has started to fill.
Okay. How many years ago did we start receiving federal funding?
What was well, maybe NARF in a different department. We've had, I can't speak to when they started receiving that, but
What about that?
well, Kelly, we had the grant. When did that start? 2 years ago. FY24, I think, or 23, we received a federal grant for Waukele Opuna.
And then we have, so NARF, right, that's through ANA. We have, Arnie is just wrapping up another ANA grant based, I think it's Olelo Hawaii based grant. So we have, it's been identified, federal funding has been identified as one of our funding sources. So Native Hawaiian Revolving Loan Fund, these other grants that RNE is helping to manage that we're closing out, language-based, and then Papahano Mokuakea. And I believe that's been more than a few years. So throughout the org, it's been a practice, it seems.
But how much total would you say that is roughly?
I think Papa is maybe up to $500,000. Like, so we just received another deposit, and then they are trying to finish one more. But these guys got the biggest, I think.
We have a NOAA grant for about 300,000. That's wrapping up, and then we also have the Olelo grant that's also wrapping up, and that's about 400,000. Oh, NARF. Oh, and then of course we have NARF. So that's a constant revolving loan fund, and that's at least half federally funded, and then OHA funded about 9 million 20 years ago.
Thank you.
Okay, trustee Kahele.
It's continuing, like, Mr. Akako's question on the personnel piece. Sorry, yeah. Continuing the personnel conversation on the land assets director budget. So page 71. The budget tables. Line 3119, 3123. So for the personnel, salary and wages, and then the associated fringe, what positions does that cover?
I believe they're meant to cover director and manager and admin assistant, but I don't oversee our HR, so maybe, okay.
Okay.
So that request for 168,000 is to cover 3 people, a land director, an admin assistant, 2 people, the land director and the admin assistant?
Oh.
Doesn't seem enough.
I
We
would
need a land
agree.
director,
I would agree.
so that needs to be adjusted. I also think, I don't think we can wait on a grant writer.
Okay.
We should incorporate that
Definitely.
into this budget line item and,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, if a grant writer is in the 65 to $90,000 range, a legacy land grant writer that would focus on, bringing in the types of revenue and resources from private funders, nonprofits, foundations, federal,
We'll
state.
have a couple of internal applicants probably.
So I think these 2 categories should be adjusted to reflect what a potential land director and their salary would be, the type that we need to attract, as well as the admin assistant and a grants writer or our legacy. Is that where we would put that? If we were to bring on a full-time legacy land grant writer, is that where we would put the personnel and fringe in this category?
I think that we probably could fund the grant writer through the administrative fees that we receive from the grants, right? They usually cover like 3% of the grant. And so, yeah, 3 to 10% of the grant. So I think that we could probably fund the grant writer through the grants that we receive.
And I would leave it here because the grant writer could not just do, grant writing and monitoring and managing if can, just for legacy lands, but recently, right, this team, Ho'omaikai, got a grant for our commercial side, Kaka'ako Makai. So at least if it's in the director's budget, then they can straddle.
So we'd leave it here then. Okay. And then I guess on this previous page, on page 70, so just to clarify, line 2999 and 3005. So we currently have a professional service contract, right? With this particular vendor, but you're asking for another $350,000 for the next 2 fiscal years. Why would we need to do that? If we're gonna bring on a full-time land director, that would hopefully replace that private contracting expertise that we have.
Yes, I agree with you. And so the impetus for that contract was in the absence of a director. We saw that there are opportunities within land to expand. Our on the legacy side, our development side, we could use some support there. And we approached the real estate consultants to help optimize our function in the organization. And before we, and that includes within part of their scope to recommend an optimal Paya Aina structure. So it may recommend increasing the full-time positions, adding new positions that don't exist, like a grant writer or a real estate analyst that would help us to assess different projects that we're considering, assess development opportunities, assess do the due diligence for lands that we're considering acquiring. That would be these are conversations that we've had with the real estate consultant. And so their information is helping inform inform the optimization, the optimal, ideal future state of our real estate department, basically. And so that work, it may continue. If we hire a director, maybe some of that scope gets trimmed off. But as the deliverables are completed, we can decrease the funding amount. I just want there to be funding for as long as it takes us to find that director that suits.
I guess what I'm saying is we have the contractor doing work for us now, right?
Yes.
This is a six-figure contract. And
Yes.
there's specific deliverables that will extend into the next fiscal year for them to complete. And at
Yes.
the culmination of that, we should have like some really good things that
Yep.
we didn't have this
Yep.
year.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could possibly reduce this requested amount, shift it to personnel
Okay.
that helps fund the land director, still have a little bit here, but maybe not necessarily $250,000 for
Mhm.
the next fiscal year. We can, considering the work that they're doing now for us, right? That hopefully will get us in a better place than we were before we started the contract with them.
Yeah, and I can take a closer look. There is, like I said, a few different hands in this contract, and so that amount represents what work BOT
Right.
is doing with them, what work administration is doing with them, what work we're doing with them in land, and SNI is doing work with them on housing, and so it encompasses all of that. It reflects the work across the program. So keep that in mind, but I do think that there is some conversation that we all can have to kind of
Right.
target the amount of hours that we wanna dedicate to that contract.
I also think, I mean, at the culmination of this contract, we have a strategic plan,
Yes.
right? We're gonna have a business operations plan and a tactical plan.
Yep.
That will.
Yep.
Yes, and so we're gonna have the foundational documents that will allow us to quickly evaluate legacy land.
Yep.
Transfers, acquisitions, commercial property investment acquisitions. And so I think that's gonna be a really, that hopefully that work is done already, right?
Yeah, ideally. And that also there's also like ad hoc requests that we've baked into their scope because we know without the director and without a fully staffed land department, there's things that they're supporting us with. And so as those deliverables are completed, then we can kind of sunset that contract.
Okay. Great.
Maybe that's looking at sunsetting in fiscal year 27, like if we have one more year, because I know,
Mhm.
you know, they cost, but they're good. They're good at what they do.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, sorry. I'm saying maybe if we can, target to sunset by the end of the fiscal year 26. At least that would, take away that 100K that's budgeted for fiscal year 27, because they are already working on the business model, operation plan, policies and
Yep.
procedures. All of those are happening. They've also been advising and providing guidance to our strategy and implementation team on our housing strategy. So I think we could take a look at that. But I do think Lori's also trying to make sure she has enough funds in there to cover the current work, because she's put some money in there, but it is, this work is gonna trickle over into fiscal year 26.
Maybe
So-
that will help us gauge what that number should be. If you can tell us how much remaining funds that we have, that is currently funding the existing contract. And, you know, based on the invoicing and the hours putting in and the work that has been delivered so far and the work that we hope to be delivered, does that amount remaining cover that existing work? And what would be needed in this FY 26 to get that work done, if not able to be completed with the remaining funds that we have? That would probably be helpful. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a really important contract because these foundational land plans, you know, it also goes right to answer one of the major critiques in our 2023 audit, that we want to make sure in 2027 we've shown tremendous progress in that, and these plans do that. So it's important work that it's doing, for sure. Trustee Aquino has a question.
Wait, go ahead.
Thank you.
Trustee Aquino.
Thank you, chairs. Lori, you're doing an admirable job of holding everything together. I was looking at the organizational chart, trying to figure out what bars coming down and going up mean. But I think the word used here is integrated assets. So you're keeping everything together. I respect that. I want to go to the question of our priorities in personnel hiring. Maybe Kapua Nui can help respond to this. Where are we in terms of being able to hire a director of resource management and land assets? I would think that many of the strategic budgeting issues that we've just discussed are going to be determined in many ways by that leader. And it's kind of shooting in the dark a little bit to anticipate what that leader may want or keep in place, as Lori used appropriately the term ad hoc earlier. And so can you speak to that, someone, where we are and how soon we can fill that with a highly talented individual? And I agree with Chair that we would really need to up the compensation for that position.
Your mic, your guys' mics are on.
Okay, mahalo. So first, I do want to mention that Lori just spoke to it earlier, right? So one of the things that the consultants did before they came up with the real estate strategy strategic plan was do an assessment of our land assets, you know, how the team is built. They interviewed, you know, several of us, and, you know, looked at other organizations and how they're managing land. And one of the things that they did share is that we aren't necessarily built, our team, you know, like we are not structured. And again, Lori just spoke to this earlier, for the portfolio that we have to manage. And so part of, you know, now that we have approved the real estate strategy as part of their, I guess, business model operational plan that they're working on, it is going to be to propose what, you know, what would be an ideal structure, again, to malama the aina and the portfolio that we have. So I just wanted to share that. So with that, the land director position was a part of that work, right? So it was to like, okay, you guys got all this aina, you're gonna, you know, do what you're gonna do. You actually need this caliber of staff or this amount of staff. And so director was included in that. So we've been depending on the land consultants to help us shape, you know, given all their expertise, what that position should look like, the description. So actually he just sent it to us on, what is today? Wednesday. So I think we just got it on Monday, the PD. Yeah. And, you know, mahalo to them because they were again gonna provide it as part of the operational plan, the business plan that they put together, but they provided it earlier because they understand the urgency. So we just got that PD. I think our Pohana is gonna have HR, so she's gonna forward it to HR to have them take a look at it. And then I do want to share, we have been talking about salaries. And so this, you know, the land director, of course, we want to take a look at that, but that one's come up as well, because I agree with what is there, if that's funding two positions that we need to increase that. And those are the conversations that were being had yesterday. So we gonna send the PD this week, maybe today if she didn't already, and hopefully we're posting early June.
So we would be posting in early June. We could hire as early as,
August.
I just wanted to encourage that process and also point out that somebody who would be of the caliber we need would also want leadership leeway. They wouldn't want to step into a blueprint and be tasked with simply executing that. And so the strategic budgeting depends upon whom we're going to hire for that leadership role.
Any other questions, trustees? Okay, mahalo. Mahalo for that. Are we still on the Kukani? Oh, you have? Go ahead. Well, this is for the Kukani local. We're still on that, correct? Yeah, we got quite a bit to go through. Yeah, okay, let's move on to the next one. Thank you. Where are we now?
Next slide. Oh, this is the one.
Pahua Heiau.
Yeah, so in Mauna Lua, Hawaii Kai, we have our Pahua Heiau. This one is a little bit smaller, a little further along in our management planning and execution. And so total funding reflects a smaller number, but the equipment expense categories where our repair and maintenance work lives. So again, management and maintenance, as well as stewardship, which includes all of those activities there to maintain the site throughout the year. Small expense for overhead, which includes water and electricity. And very similar for Waialua Courthouse. That is a building, but also a small property. And so one of the projects we want to do at Courthouse this year is to do another property condition assessment like we did for Kekaha. And so that funding is reflected there. We have a stewardship contract under our equipment expense category because it's repair and maintenance related. And then again, similar utilities in overhead. Any questions here?
Go ahead, trustee Akaka.
Mahalo. Can you remind me regarding the heiau, in terms of properly stewarding, do we have like hold on, do we have wildlife walking around there that might be a challenge in the current and near future where we need to have proper
Like fencing, perimeter
yeah.
fencing? Only the two-legged kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do actually, and La'akia, if you want to come up and speak to, we have a public viewing area that we budgeted for previously and we have contracted for since, but some of that requires permitting to initiate the installation.
And all the signage included.
Yeah, so there's signage. Yep. And so that includes fencing and landscaping and then actual interpretive sign and viewing area to kind of create a physical and spatial barrier between the public, our two-legged friends, and anything more to
Do we have photos of it?
of the heiau.
We did in a presentation.
current- yeah.
previously,
I'm
kinda
just trying to
from a
remember.
Lower angle.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
She said it all. Setup.
So we pay for electricity. What electricity do we have there?
Oh yeah, so that's part of irrigation. There was landscaping, it's kind of been undermanaged, and then through the public viewing area, we're planning on doing buffer landscaping around the fence line, so that's to support that. So we just didn't cancel it. We are anticipating the project starting soon, so we want to keep that available so that when everything does go in, they can test it accordingly and make sure everything works.
Mahalo. And regarding the courthouse, is part of this, are we looking into what the cost would look like in renovating the lua?
The Lua?
The
At
Lua.
courthouse.
Yeah,
Mm,
because when there are those that are using the space, I understand there's a lua, but it's maybe not at a
Yeah, so there is budget to do. It's been a while since we've done a property condition assessment. I know and I'm out there every week. I know the Lua is operational. It's clean. There may be some improvements updates that could be made to it. But the bigger priority, we have to empty the septic too, but the bigger priority I think is looking at renovating the pump house behind the courthouse itself. That might be what you're thinking of. Because that could really be a good space for a pop-up native Hawaiian business, for example. But the condition assessment will, there's a repair budget in here that our steward can make use of for the higher priority repairs, and then on maybe a smaller scale. And then the condition assessment will reveal those larger repairs that we may need to take care of and how much those cost.
okay, and this also the assessment would include the sidewalks.
Yes,
Yeah,
oh,
everything.
so that's part of the building repairs and so forth.
Correct.
Okay. How soon are you folks looking to do that?
The assessment.
Yeah.
As soon
the
as-
funding is
yeah.
approved.
Fiscal year 26 immediately.
Thank you.
Better not to wait.
Okay, thank you. Any other trustees? Go ahead, trustee Galutaria.
Thank you. This has to do with the Halavaluluku. I'm trying to, in my mind's eye, where is it again? Is this the one coming out of the Pali? Or is it Wilson? And it's on the left as you come down. Where is it?
So it's the H3,
Street.
yeah, so it's on the Halawa side, where Hawaiian Cement is. Do you know where that is? And then it goes all the way into so there's a site under the overpass, under the highway, and then there's a site deeper in the valley that's the Halawa sites that
Yeah, you drive up
work,
the
yeah. Mhm.
the single road.
So like, I think it's the 3rd or 4th mile marker that you don't drive safely, but if you were to look over, that's where the site is. And then on the other side, when you go around the loop going on to Likelike, that's where Luluku's site is.
Yeah, is there ongoing programming that
Yeah, so
accompanies this? Or is it in another port?
it is in Orga. So Ardina is online. She is our coordinator for that program, and she can speak specifically to that.
And we're gonna get to
Yeah,
that
in 2
eventually.
slides, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank
Mahalo.
you.
We're just kind of going in the order there, presenting. So where are we now? We still in Wailua or are we on Palauea?
Any other questions for?
No.
Okay, we are on Palauea.
Okay.
It was only one page you missed. Okay. So for Palauea, as I shared, our different properties have different funding sources. When we acquired this property, La'akia can speak more specifically to this, but it has its own funding source. It comes from royalties from sales of adjacent lands around our property boundary. And that includes how many properties? Like 17, there's 17 to 20 properties that anytime one gets sold, we get a percentage of that sales. Yeah, so the funding for the programming comes exclusively from that fund. Oh, do you wanna change the next slide? Okay, And we also have previously gotten a grant for this property, a small one. This might have been our first legacy grant. It was like $35,000 to do ungulate fencing on the Mauka side of our property because there's a lot of access deer on that side of Maui, and they access our properties and kind of trample our archaeological features. And so that was a kind of emergency or an urgent project that we completed 2 years ago, I believe.
What did you use the funds for to protect the property from the access deer?
We built fencing.
I was just gonna
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that.
yeah. And then this year we have a few projects. Oh, and we received a donation from a nearby landowner that will fund some property improvement projects this year as well. So that $85,000 figure that you see under equipment, that is represents a donation that we've already received. So we're just allocating it within the budget. And then we have our stewardship contract that has that offers those maintenance and management activities that you see here. And that is the bulk. You'll see that the bulk of legacy land project funding requests are under equipment for the repair and maintenance work that we do at each of our properties.
Any questions, trustees? Rick, go ahead, I guess. You can-
Okay, and then Waukeleo this was previously grant funded. It was the remaining funding from the acquisition. But that, I think about a year or a year and a half ago, Grace can confirm, we spent all of that down and have since started to apply for grants, got a $385,000 grant, I think, in FY23 to pay for some fencing at Waukele to protect rare and endangered species within a pu'u, within a crater on site, on property. But now it's part of the core budget. And we have a stewardship contract there that offers comprehensive management plan implementation services. We did a pretty robust management plan with the community. I think that was approved in 2016, between 2016 and 18. And since then, we've been implementing the results of that, or the outcome of that management plan, including major invasive species management, native reforestation, and continued community engagement. Last year, this board approved funding to construct engagement facilities, and so that work is underway. And at some point, we would love to invite this board to come and see the improvements that have occurred. We're really intentionally trying to bring people into the forest so that there's community ownership of taking care and education of taking care of our forests. This is on our watershed. It is part of our watershed on Hawaii Island, and so super important programmatic outcomes there. Let's see. Oh, and then as we were speaking to previously, part of that USDA federal grant that Keone was explaining, 76,000 of that was awarded for a fencing project at Waukele.
Okay, trustee Kahele.
Lori, can you expand on the page 81, 4566 and 4579, the two fiscal year requests, 208,500 and 210,000? Is that to a contractor or it's listed under equipment? What is that?
Yeah, so these are contracts, but they're repair and maintenance in nature, and repair and maintenance is a subcategory under equipment. So those contracts fall under the equipment expense category. That goes to a contractor that stewards our forest, basically.
So is this as needed or do we have
It's
a
a
year-round contract?
We do, yeah.
What's the current contract amount?
The amount, it's been annually about 200,000. And as community engagement activities increase, there's some hours, they help to facilitate that. It's so remote, the forest is 26,000 acres and the remote location of it really requires presence on site that that a land agent can support, but not individually. So there's technicians on the ground opening trails, maintaining grass as we have these facilities installed. That'll be part of their scope as well. And then the community engagement itself is included in that contract.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other Palawea Waukele questions? Okay. Wow, guys. And then we will go to our Alavaluluku Interpretive Development Project. Next slide. Okay, we have Ardina online. I'm just gonna do a quick overview. This project, as you can see, is projected to sunset in FY26. If history tells us anything, it may be drawn out to FY27, but we are hopeful that it will be closed out this biennium. I'll let Ardina speak to kind of the status of where the project is, but this budget reflects, the total budget reflects mostly the coordinator's salary, because a lot of the project and construction budget is being directly contracted for through DOT. And so these are funds that are vetted and approved by DOT. But if you have any questions, Ardina is available to support.
Is she on now?
She's online, yeah.
Oh, okay, she's gonna present?
No, this is, I mean, that's it.
All right.
That's
Okay,
it.
trustees, before we move on to the one we're all dying to ask questions about. Kakakusai. We're in Halava. We're
Halavaluluku,
still
yeah.
on that.
Yeah, I mean, trustee Galateri asked about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Ardina's.
Dina,
Oh, okay, good.
she's online.
Trustee, can you repeat your question for?
Ardina, my question had to do with the programming. And can you be a little bit more descriptive about what programming for Halava is?
Mahalo for the question, Trustee Galutaria. Absolutely. So HLID was created in, I believe, in 1999. The first project coordinator was hired in the year 2000. And this was to facilitate select mitigation actions for the Halava Luluku project. There's been multiple phases that were established through a cooperative agreement between the Hawaii Department of Transportation and OHA. So from the year 2000 to the year 2022, the HLAD coordinator completed all tasks and deliverables associated with the phase 1 planning and the phase 2 design development. We're currently in phase 3, which is implementation of select mitigation actions and construction of support facilities for our 2 steward groups that have been identified, one group in Halava and one group in Luluku. That answers your question.
Somewhat, I was a little broad, but specifically the programming, yeah.
Ardina, can you speak to the stewardship management plans that were completed?
Yes, absolutely. So the stewardship management plans were facilitated for each of our identified steward groups, and this was to build capacity for them to gain access in perpetuity through a permitting process with HDOT, as well as set them up for continuing programming and educational activities at their sites. And with these plans, they were able to acquire the permits, and HDOT and Federal Highways have agreed to build support facilities for each group. So that's where we are currently.
Okay, yeah, I would like to learn a little bit more about it.
I'm happy to provide a greater detailed update of the overall project. Perhaps at the ILM committee meeting would be most appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, however, whatever is easiest, that's all. I just want to support.
Sure, and just as like a big picture of the financials, the total project budget was established at $11 million. Again, 100% externally funded. 90% comes from the Federal Highway Administration. 10% comes from Hawaii Department of Transportation. Of that $11 million, we still have approximately 4.4 million remaining, 3 million of which has been earmarked for the support facilities at each of our locations.
Nice.
Okay.
Go
Chair.
ahead,
Madam Chair.
trustee Souza.
Yeah, mahalo Ardina, but as we look to put together or finalize our agenda for next week, this might be on next week's one, and we're gonna, just to be prepared. Yeah, just get ready. I mean, you have it all in front of you already, so. Yeah, thank you.
Trustee Kahele.
Yeah, let me follow up on.
Kahele.
Yeah, let me follow up on. So can you expand on the strategic alignments and key initiatives slide, where you reference that this is the closeout of the project is a key goal during this biennium? And what does that actually mean? And what happens to the Luluku stewardship, the strategic management plans that were done, the different stakeholders, Aina Momona, the different groups that have been a part of this, the mitigation efforts, if we're closing it out? And then I guess if we are closing it out, then what's Ardina going to do next? Or
Yeah.
is that going to change the org and the
It,
personnel?
it does. So it would.
What are her plans?
Personally, I don't know what her plans are. She can maybe respond to that, but I think that
Personally, but
it's,
the
yeah,
position.
the position, it would open up a vacancy. I would like it in legacy, if we're gonna continue expanding our portfolio. The project as it sits in OHA now and is funded in OHA now would be done. It would terminate. And so the position would end. OHA outside of the HLID project is also a consultant to the MOA, or what's the document? I think it's a 1987 MOA that has OHA, the SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, Native American. There are 2 signatories and 3. Sorry, ACHP. Ardina, maybe you can speak to the 5 partners on the MOA, and then how OHA continues to contribute to that effort, which will
Why is the project ending? Is that by statute or the?
Well, I think it's
mitigation
the
agreement? And
funding.
when is that date?
The funding was maxed out or the funding that they allocated for this 30 years ago was $11 million, and that's gonna get spent down when these facilities are constructed. And so there won't be more funding to fund the project within OHA. OHA will continue to be a consultant, because HDOT and Federal Highways don't really have a cultural component or department that would support management of these sacred spaces. So OHA will continue to consult in that way. And the HLID scope was very specific, and the components of those projects will be completed at the end of this project.
Is there any desire to get the State Department of Transportation or the Federal Highways Department of Transportation to commit to
Continue.
more resources for historic preservation mitigation, which is really what this was created for? Do we feel like that work was done for what our beneficiaries went through to build the H3?
Yeah, there actually was upwards of 80 to 90 archaeological cultural sites that were negatively impacted by this
Sure.
construction, and only 3 remain in the project. So I would say no, there's not a satisfactory mitigation effort as it impacts collectively all of the damage that was done. And so we've been working with Kamakana, who represents OHA on the MOA side of the project. The project itself and within the scope that previously was defined doesn't include the entire scope of impact that it had. So Kamakana is helping in compliance, has helped. He was previously on the HLID project, so he's very familiar, super valuable asset to OHA. And I think in his role in compliance can continue to support additional partnership or resource requests perhaps from Federal Highways and HDOT. So HDOT is the landowner, and then Federal Highways funds it. $11 million 30 years ago is not the same as it is today. And so the argument can be made for more resourcing, but we can share that in conversations with Federal Highways, they reluctantly agreed to pay for any excess of the 11 million that kind of just came up as we estimated the cost for the final projects to be constructed. And so they generously offered a little bit more to fully fund the remainder of the project, but not enthusiastically to continue. It's a unfortunate. I can tell you all the stakeholders are excited for this project to close out in its current, how it currently exists. Stewards, our communities, they would like for that. There's a lot of historical trauma that I think a ceremonious closeout of the project as it is now would help to start to repair from and heal from. And I think conversations after that, OHA is always going to be responsible for some kind of partnership and continued responsible management of our cultural features at these sites.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from our trustees? Okay, we're going down to, we're finished with, so we're done with the halava. We're gonna move on to the next item. And we see here kakako.
Are we ready for commercial
yes.
properties? Okay. Leanne, I'll call you up.
Still
When
not sure about that. We all
You might as well come up now.
think about it.
Mahalo, Ardina. All right, so with me at the table is our superwoman of commercial properties. Her counterpart position has been vacant since, I don't know, month 6 of your employment. So she's been holding down our commercial properties program by herself. I mean, not by herself. I'm definitely supporting her, but she is, and with her, she brings decades of experience in commercial properties. So treasure chest right here. And so our commercial properties, I just want to reiterate how I spoke to previously that property management in general on both the legacy side and the commercial side are significantly unpredictable. And so we generate our budgets aspirationally, and we also operationally are prepared pivot when things arise. And so what you see here may or may not reflect what you see in the next realignment or what you see at the end of the biennium. But these are our intentions for the next 2 years. Additionally, we do a annual review of our capital project budgets for each property, and the capital project budgets didn't come in at the time that we submitted these budgets. So there are additional asks, but they are still within the spending limit for each
Okay.
property. So just we'll talk about them briefly in this meeting, but just to tee it up. And we will start at Kaka'akumakai. So there is a budget 8210 that's for all of Kaka'akumakai, and that's what you see here in the first section. Personnel is allocated there, and that is subject to change. But a big chunk of the budget is under contract, so that goes towards our property management contract. The commissions that we project, so that's determined by available spaces and our intention to fill those spaces. And then security contracts and legal expenses. Of course, the debt service figured there, this is interest and principal payments for a loan on our Nalama Kukui property.
Okay.
So we don't have a loan at Kaka'akumakai, just to clarify. And then, of course, under equipment, there are repair and maintenance activities that occur that our property management company coordinates and facilitates for us. And then, and this is for, again, across all nine properties. And then overhead, that's a description of what is included under overhead, property supplies, telephone service, utilities, insurance, and bank fees. And then we have program expenses that includes common area maintenance. And again, I do want to recall that a significant portion of the budget ask is inclusive of these recoverable expenses. And so it's something that we're going to pay up front and then we recover from our tenants. And then we also, because of the activity that we started to initiate at Lot A of Kaka'akumakai 2-3 years ago, a budget was created specifically for Kaka'akumakai Lot A, 8211, to track specific Lot A expenditures. And you'll see what's budgeted here. Debt services in, okay. This is not here. Okay. Okay, so just confirming with Leanne, the debt service that appears in 8210, in parentheses, it says 8211, so that actually exists under Kaka'akumakai 8211, Lot A. And then the contracts that are there, the Lot A activation coordinator is an effort that sort of continued from the Lot A activity that we were trying to initiate. And so that's really gonna, whether we keep that in there or not, whether we increase or decrease it, is really gonna depend on how we move forward with all of our properties, with that property in particular. So that's kind of a placeholder for if we want to continue pursuing activating that lot. And then you'll see here a new additional ask that isn't represented in the spreadsheet, but is a conversation that's being had at the legislature, that OHA is being tasked with developing a Native Hawaiian Cultural Center at Kaka'akumakai. And so that is an estimate that we put together to procure an architect who would facilitate stakeholder engagement to inform a conceptual, to inform program development. So what type of activities are gonna occur at a cultural center. The stakeholders will likely include the city and county, our beneficiaries, OHA itself. And so facilitation of that engagement costs, has a cost. And then also the program development itself will determine square footage and then conceptual design. And then we'll get a construction and operational rough order of magnitude so we can kind of project how much the full project is going to cost. Oh, and another, as we started to speak to, we last week were awarded a Environmental Protection Agency grant in the amount of $2 million to do assessment and planning work for Kakakumakai. That was the scope in our application, and we successfully applied for that grant and were awarded last week.
Wonderful. Yay. Okay, so let's go. I'm gonna start with Trustee Wahe. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. The first is, at the last, I think it was the last, at one of the ILM meetings, Paul recommended for one of the properties that we improve it, and then we can charge more than double the square foot value of it is. So my question is for investments, for expenses where we're investing in like equity in our commercial properties to make them more valuable. Are those things we need to budget or not because we foresee using like loans or bonds to fund those kind of things?
That's a really good question. And I think up to this point, we've just been using revenue to repair what we know needs to be repaired. And in certain cases, like Lot L, the warehouse, depending on who the tenant is, the future tenant is, they might want to do their own repairs. So we don't necessarily want to invest too much into it that then the tenant would change altogether.
Right. But if we did, we wouldn't need to budget it, would we? Or
if we explored a different source of funding?
right.
I mean, we potentially would still budget for it so that it's recorded. That's generally how our commercial properties budgets are generated. But it's the mechanism of it is different from how our core budget operates. So
Okay.
to record it, we would, and record the expense, we would have it in
But
here.
it wouldn't be in this budget. We wouldn't have to put it in the biennium budget. Like
Go ahead, Ramona.
if we decided to do something and we have nothing in this biennium to fund it with, would we need to do that, or would we be able to fund it through other means because it's an investment?
So I think that what we would do is probably initiate an action item, and it would be sent to the board, and the means of financing would be discussed there.
And my second question is, for this new expense, the architect, is the intention that if we approve this budget, that at a future date, we'll get a chance to get an action item that has a better description of what this is going to be and how this money is going to be, a breakdown of how it's going to be spent? Or is it like once we approve this budget, it's approved and you guys will just proceed with the procurement?
I guess in short, the latter. But there are, of course, the realignments that occur that are organizationally will do. Commercial properties as a program can do a realignment throughout the year at any time when it's required or needed. And that basically is to request the adjustment in the budget that's needed to do different projects. But the budget here reflects just general property management that we would do. It's our operations.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned about filling spaces. And how many spaces are you referring to?
At Kakakomakai, this lot L right now. Right now at Kakakomakai, we only have lot L, the warehouse, available. It's fully leased otherwise.
Okay, go ahead, trustee Eleuterio.
Thank you, Chair. So basically, the budget requests are placeholders because we have no specificity to activity right now based on, the board will have to provide direction in that way, correct?
Like development activity or a shift in leasing strategy. Yeah, I think that organizationally, if we want to change how we're operating, right now we're just targeting highest and best use until there's a clear direction from the organization.
I understand. So the placeholder is simply for Lot A because we haven't engaged in any of the other discussion for the other lots yet. Okay.
Yeah, so lot A is sort of this budget is a residual of the conversations that we've had about lot A. And then nothing, I think the other conversation that we've sort of developed further along is the lot E A fees building and what we're gonna do with that. Still in discussion, so no allocated budget here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
needed clarity. Thank you.
Go ahead, trustee Souza.
Hello, Madam Chair. Laurie, could you guys explain why the property management fee decreases significantly, I guess, over the next 26 and 27? And I have another follow-up question after that. And if you could talk about the commissions as well, 600,000 and 65,000. I guess 600,000 in fiscal year 26
Correct.
and 65 in fiscal year 27.
Correct. It significantly is higher in 26, and that's for our Lot L leasing activity. So I did a max commission estimate on that so that we have enough. This past 2 years that I've been here, we haven't estimated high enough in our commissions, and we've run out of money continuously. So I did a max lease, max rate commission with an outside broker and with our broker. So that's a large portion of that 600 is Lot L. There are about 4 or 5 other lots that are up for renewal that we will also pay commissions on that make up the difference. But the huge variance you see there is commissions. Your property management fee doesn't escalate. It's a 3.5% of your gross revenue.
Right.
So it's that commissions is that heavy difference there between the 2 fiscal years. Yeah.
Got it. And one more question, Madam Chair. Legal services, I see $20,000 fiscal year 26 on line item 4937. I don't see anything in fiscal year 27. Is it 20,000 in fiscal year 26?
It's there as needed. And if we don't use it, we'll roll it over. Yeah, we'll
Carry.
encumber it. Correct.
Okay.
And it's just there as a placeholder.
Okay.
And we'll probably revisit the 27 budget with commercial real estate. It's very hard to
Right.
anticipate and plan out the future, especially just 2
Sure,
years out, right? So we'll definitely be realigning 27 the closer we get once we see how 26 goes.
Well, especially if we lease lot L. I think
Correct.
That'll affect the budget big time. Okay, right on, Madam
Sure.
Chair. Thank you, guys.
Trustee Aquina.
Thank you. Could you direct me to where I'll find the contracts for consultants such as Peregrine and other real estate consultants? What page for that?
So for the real estate consultant that is informing all of land and then also strategy and implementation, the Board of Trustees admin, that's in the director's budget, 8,100. They also are supporting some commercial properties, a lot of our commercial property operations, but it's centralized in,
So it's mainly in the directors.
yes, for the real estate for our property specific manager and leasing company, that those are in the properties themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Trustee Kahele.
Yeah, I'll go back to what trustee Souza was referring to. So the 600,000 in commissions, don't we have commissions that we budgeted for in FY 25 for Lot L?
Yes, but it was at a much lower rate. And as we didn't lease in 25 to any new tenants, that commission, we
This carryover then, I mean, the money doesn't disappear.
This is true. Yes, we could encumber it and roll it over into the next year. I do
What's
believe there is.
left of that?
I am not sure. I'd have to get back to you on what's available, what is left available in there, because I did use a large portion, if not all or more, for the Lot I, which I did not, wasn't budgeted for. I leased it all out, so I had to pay commissions on it. So there may not be anything left, but I'll look at those numbers and get back to you.
And what is the current status on Lot L?
We are in
Last we had
active.
heard, there were 4 potential tenants.
We do. We have a handful of interested parties. We are in active lease negotiations with several. I can divulge more information, maybe in an executive session, but we have a lot of activity and we're confident we're not going to have any trouble leasing it out.
I think maybe explain to us why the board should consider $600,000 in commissions. Talk to us, break that down for us.
Commissions are based on a cost per square foot and the term. If the length of the term has an effect on that, the cost that we get, the cost that is finally negotiated and agreed to, affects that number. And again, what I did was a best case scenario for the highest rate we could possibly get in this market. And for our brokers, the longest term, as well as an outside broker, which we would also pay on the tenant's behalf.
We'll follow up with that to break that entirely down.
Absolutely happy to do that.
Lease term, the amount, I mean, I'm assuming it's at that $2 a square foot range for the 140,000 square feet.
I believe I did it at 215, which is what we've got it listed for. Yeah, and at over 5-year term and with an outside broker, you're looking at about $450,000 in commission.
Okay.
Which will most likely be broken down if we don't do one tenant. If we do multiple tenants, we'll be paying a portion of it, you know, for what this space and a portion of it for this space and this tenant. It just depends on how the deals work out.
And then how does that line 4933 work with 4957 and the 200,000 you're asking for the repairs of Lot L?
That is the remaining repairs. We have not exceeded the $1.3 million that the board approved back in January of 2024. The repairs have just taken a little bit longer. It does take a lot of people here on Aloha time. A lot of people are very busy. And so to get scheduled and everything, we are wrapping up repairs, but I do anticipate a few of them rolling over into being invoiced in July. So I just want to make sure that that money is there.
How much of the 1 million do you have left over that the board provided?
Yeah, it's just under 100,000 once we complete all repairs.
Are the repairs necessary to
They
leasing out
they
the
are
building?
required. Yeah, these are code repairs, like with our fire alarm system, with our structural roof, the bay doors, the you know, exterior sheet metal siding that all had to be repaired to make it safe to lease. Yeah.
So active work is being done right now as we
Correct.
speak on
Yeah.
Lot L.
Yeah, we are wrapping up those repairs. They did take longer than we anticipated, but we want to make sure we did everything. And then as you work on a warehouse and do, repairs, you're going to have things that do pop up. So we've had to address additional things, like we're going to have to replace 2 additional fire hydrants. So that was an additional cost, but some of our numbers have come in under, so we've been able to keep it under budget. And it's going very well. We're almost complete.
When do you expect Lot L to be leased? Again, this calendar year?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I would hope Q1 of our fiscal year. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, with all that's going on the Kakakamakai properties, and we had a chance to chat when we were in Mary Monarch that weekend for the grand opening, and you shared some really good ideas and concerns as well. What would be your wish list for Kakakamakai?
A developer and a master plan, solid direction, a team of qualified experts who know more than I do to kind of guide and lead us so that we're making the right decisions for not just our immediate goals, but long term. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have to work on that really quick. Thank you so much for that. Anyone else for?
Yeah, I have a quick question. The $350,000 for the new ask, where's that in the tables? Trying to figure out where that line is.
It's not, it's an additional ask. It was estimated after we distributed this, so we'll add it to the new draft.
Okay. you're gonna find room in what you're asking for in this land budget for $350,000?
We have that. Yeah, so if you look at the spending limit on the summary sheet on page 2 of the packet, or at least of the prelim budget details, it shows the spending limit for each of the properties, and that delta is kind of what we have to that isn't reflected in the budget sheet here.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next item. We are into now Nalama Kukui.
So at our headquarters, Nalamakukui, this is pretty consistent with our annual spending, about 4.5 million per year, and budgeted for the total commercial properties budget. Personnel is also reflected there, subject to change. There are capital expenditures that aren't reflected here, but again, the sequence of expense categories are similar, and they just cost different because they're different property types. And so from Kakakumakai's, and we have significantly more tenants in this space, and that informs our operational budget directly.
Questions, trustees? Go ahead, trustee Akaka.
Mahalo. Under electrical window cleaning, on-site building maintenance, fire, life safety, refuse, pest control, and so forth. That now will include tinting of our windows and so forth, and retractable blinds that move.
I haven't looked into blinds yet, but these windows are old. They do require some love and attention eventually. Right now, they're holding straight. They do have a UV tint on them. However, you can see some of them, it is coming off. So we have got a number to retint and reseal all the windows. It's not in this budget. I do know approximately how much it costs, and we were.
What would it be? What would be the cost?
About, already, $675,000 to retint and reseal all these windows. Now, it's an investment in your property. Right now, it's not an immediate need. I do think there are things that possibly Royce in operations could do by creating, because this is your internal and tenant space, that he can do some sort of a shading situation in here, just like we have in your offices. Because we also, over there in the admin side, get a lot of that sunlight as well. It's really nice. It cuts down on a lot of electrical costs. So, but I do understand that ask, and we do plan to address it in the coming years.
Yeah, it beats doing this all the time. So, yeah,
I would say it is an absolute immediate need.
Thank you.
We're burning right now. And
That's
I
hot.
can only imagine how those that are within that space that don't have sunbrellas. When I first came on, one of my first questions was, why do we have these sunbrellas here? That is a health issue. And for myself, I can speak on this, and I see other people's heads burning here, that we need to have tinting, but if we can't have that tinting done immediately, to have some kind of electrical blinds that retractable that move and automated, whether by remote control or
It's like a temporary, just for now until, right? The retractable is what you're referring to? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This might be a good time to talk about in my notes. OHA tenant and OHA landlord. So this is a OHA space. And that is managed, of course, you know, by Royce in ops. And so those expenses, depending on the ask, would sit in their budget. And then any building landlord expenses would sit in land. Commercial properties is your landlord, basically.
I also want to note that I've been asking for this for a number of years. So I feel that this is 8 years plus overdue. And on top of that, I think in terms of offsetting electrical and costs and so forth, I know that we have discussed in a previous day on solar options and roofing along the parking. I see that we have other government properties that have that shade their parking lot. So I would be interested in us immediately looking at roofing and having solar panels, and for us to have, whether it's tinting or at the very least to have some kind of thing to offset this lighting situation that we have here. I really would like us to do that as soon as possible. Because not just that, not just the skin, but like even the eyes, just sitting here for hours on end on the daily, it is such a strain on the eyes as well. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, trustee Galatario.
Just for clarity, so this budget does not reflect the practice of us renting to ourselves. Is it in this budget? Or you said it is in Royce's budget? So, okay, no, you want to be more specific?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. OHA tenant pays rent and CAM to OHA landlord. And essentially, I turn around and use that for your principal and interest payments on your loan that was used to purchase this building. So you are paying rent to yourself, but it is going right back into your asset. Does that answer your question, trustee?
Well, just the general practice of renting to yourself, and what trustee Okaka that was almost an exercise in talking to yourself. Because essentially she's saying to us, let's do that. So in this conversation, we could probably say, go do that. Would that be sufficient to allay trustee Okaka's concerns?
Yes. In short, we will work with facilities and operations to distinguish where in the budget and where that operational task actually sits. The reason that there is a separation in programs is so that we are clear budget-wise where the funding goes for and who is tasked for these. But we work very closely with Royce and his team. And so, and I know that they heard it in their conversation with you guys on Monday, and we were watching as well. So we were very prepared, and we are working with them, and we'll look at the numbers and address it moving forward.
Okay, go ahead, Everett.
Want to say something?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, trustees.
Morning.
If I could maybe provide a brief explanation, maybe to help the board in, this, admittedly confusing position that OHA is in, both as a tenant and the owner of the building. So with regard to the payments that are made, by OHA as the tenant, the user of space within the Nalama Kukui building, those are made pursuant to a loan covenant within our loan agreement with American Savings Bank, which we've refinanced the NLK building, right, the acquisition and the improvement costs to get us into this space. That is because that loan is a non-recourse loan, meaning the bank needs enough in terms of equity and interest in the property to say that if anything were to happen to OHA's payments on that loan, that they have enough to support their own interests, right, to back the loan, and what they're putting into it. So those, payments, we describe them as rent, lease rent, or CAM, but it's really amounts that are specified within the loan covenants. Because we're, of course, both in this case, kind of the tenant and the landlord, so we can't have this contract with ourselves. But again, we're trying to satisfy the banks, the lenders' requirements to have certain, amounts getting generated from the property, because we're the ones using this space in lieu of commercial rents coming in, right? That can again support the loan and the bank's financing of that. We have to provide payments, because we're again generating that instead of just being kind of a free user of sorts in the building that the bank then can't, doesn't have any ability to get money from. So that's kind of the payments of OHA as the tenant, so to speak, under the loan. As to the distinction maybe between, the operational projects, right, that affect OHA's use of this space as a tenant, those again are things that would otherwise be pushed onto an individual commercial tenant, a user of NLK. And it's not something that's maybe borne by OHA as the landlord, right, which then can pass on a lot of those costs as part of the common area maintenance, the bigger capital improvements that are shared by all building tenants, including OHA. So, it is, I understand it, it is frustrating when some of these projects are not implemented, but there is some of a distinction because certain types of projects, we can't spread out the costs of those as building-wide expenses that can then be recovered through a percentage, right, based on each individual tenant's use of the space of the building. And then projects, such as this, or, if OHA were to add partitions or some kind of improvement within our tenant space, those are things that OHA would be taking on, right? Because we cannot pass on those kinds of in-suite costs to our other tenants, right?
Right.
In the same way we wouldn't expect to bear the costs of any other individual tenants' improvements within their own space unless agreed to in the lease terms.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Thank you so much for explaining that to us. Anyone else? Trustee Souza.
Madam Chair. Leanne and Laurie, I guess I know Leanne earlier, you said that we take basically the payments from the other lessees and it kind of goes to OHA and then we pay it that way towards the principal and interest. Say tomorrow we don't have that income coming in. How do we budget for that? And it would need to come from somewhere. So at that point, where do we get the funds from? If we don't have that resources right now coming in from other tenants. I know it's in Royce's budget. Yeah, worst case scenario. I'm just saying, because no, hypothetical, I guess, what? Yeah, how do we make up? Say we're short, 500,000 or something, well, whatever the note is on our loan, but. Sorry.
It's budgeted. The interest and principal payments are budget. It's in our budgets.
Budget. Where is it? Where is it? It's in your budget. Okay, got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Right, and I'm going to segue to Trustee Kahele.
Okay, so, yes, sir. Maybe this will help me understand this. Page 37 of the budget tables. 37. And page 40 as well, but 37, line 1062. So we pay $1 million
Storage.
to rent. Because the 96.1 is for storage. So $1 million we paid to Colliers, to you, okay? And you take that $1 million and do what with? You take the $1 million and what do you do? with that $1 million?
Essentially, it's logged as income. Well, I'll let Mona speak on that. Go ahead.
The $1 million is rent, and then their budget is used, that $1 million is used for whatever expenses that, you know, the Nalama Kukui has.
Not
So
the
it-
debt service.
It includes a debt service also.
But then we asked for debt service on page 87, $1.178 million.
Right, so it's an offset with the revenue. So the revenues are basically the spending limit, right, of Nalama Kukui. And then we have the budget here that offsets the spending limit or the revenues of the commercial properties.
So of the $1 million we pay in the ops budget, none of that is going to pay the 2 lines of debt service on line 5336 and 5337, the principal and interest.
So this is a rare case where we can see the tenant's budget and how it is revenue that supports everything that we as the landlord are budgeting for. And so any of our other tenants might have their own budgets. The income that, or the rent that they pay also feeds into the budget that we put together. So as the budget ask is basically our request for your approval to spend our revenue in this way. It's not drawing down from the trust. It's drawing from our income that we generate on the property. And so it's not a $1 million ask from us to pay us. It's $1 million. It's not $1 million ask from the landlord to pay the landlord. It's $1 million ask from the tenant to pay the landlord. And the landlord's budget articulates how we're going to spend the $1 million plus everything else, all the other income rents that we get.
When is the ASB loan maturity date?
I think that right now we just started paying principal and interest. It was a 3-year interest only. And I think it's for 15 years and then there's a balloon payment. And then at that time we have to decide whether we're going to refinance or not. But I can confirm the terms of the loan.
How much do we owe for the purchase of this property?
35? Is it 35 or
We can find out.
I think it was about 25 million. Yeah.
Okay. I know someone else had a question. Trustee Wahe?
I was just wondering, because I wasn't even thinking about our role as a landlord. But you know, when you quoted the price to renovate all the skylights, did you mean for the entire complex? Oh, okay, that's not. It wasn't just for OHA. Okay. But that price makes more sense.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Put it up.
As a landlord, if I do anything, it's for the benefit of everybody that's in this building. So I wouldn't tint just your windows. I would do it for the entire complex.
Got it.
For our entire asset, yeah.
Sorry.
Trustee Souza?
Somebody's mic. Madam Chair. His question was towards the landlord aspect of it. My question is towards the tenant. Do we have a lease agreement with ourselves? And how long is that term? That's not needed, is what you're saying. We have to show that income as far as the bank is concerned, right? But,
It's connected to the loan covenant.
okay.
Because the payment, what Everett was explaining, that payment is required in the loan covenant. So it's as long as that term of the loan is.
Okay. You want to say anything, Everett?
I concur with what Mona said. In addition, it is something that we were specifically looking at. But again, given that OHA serves in both roles, we cannot have privity, what's called privity of a contract with ourselves. So
This is where
you need
LLPs come in.
two parties, right, to
Yeah.
have a contract.
Right.
So you cannot, I mean, it's basically a fiction if we were to create a contract with ourselves to say that we are going to be bound to certain terms and pay certain amounts. So the bank doesn't really have anything to rely on. But they still want a reliable income coming in from the building, right, from the properties, as if it were fully leased out, and some kind of commitment by OHA that can be held to say that we are going to pay certain amounts during the term of the loan. So that's where that loan covenant came in to satisfy that bank requirement.
Got it. So our rent, I mean, Colliers was our property manager at that point, but there's also a fee, right? There's a 10% or whatever we're paying, 3.5% for the property to the property manager is what I'm saying. The $1 million. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's kind of rolled into your CAM. Our property management fee here is 3.5% of our gross revenue
That's
of our
overall.
income. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Okay.
it's supported by our operating budget, which is supported by the common area maintenance that we charge all our tenants.
That's good. Thank you.
Trustee Akaka?
How often are we revisiting the contract with Colliers? And is it where it's a competitive market where we're looking at other entities to manage our properties?
So it is selected competitively through, I think this one was professional services. Actually, we weren't part of that selection committee, but it's a 5-year contract. And so as the termination date approaches, then we'll do a performance evaluation of the contract and reassess either, is the max 5 years? Yeah. So if it's a max, if the time of performance is totally completed, then we'll go out again for bid, another competitive procurement for a property manager.
How many individuals within Colliers is servicing us currently?
Oh, hard to say. So we have 2 property management positions that are dedicated to this property, and then 2 leasing agents that are dedicated to this property. All properties. Well, we're speaking about this contract. And then internally, they also have accountants that are dedicated to managing our financials.
Mahalo.
Any other trustees? Follow up? I know we mentioned earlier about solar. I've been up with some other solar companies who are very familiar with this building. And they've also had, I guess you could say, met with the previous admin, whoever it was at the time. And they did mention that this is perfect setup to have that. And like Trustee Kaka mentioned regarding the, I don't know if you guys ever been out to the water park, you see all of their covered parking areas. It's kind of similar to that because that's all solar. So have you, because I honestly believe we should incorporate that into our budget and or at least do have a meetup with several of the companies, do a presentation for us. Is that something folks are going to be doing
Yeah.
real soon?
So in the past, we've actually got pretty far down the road in terms of procuring to install. And that was halted. And so we know that it's possible, but there are mechanics in terms of where is the energy going to go to. There are how many meters? 57 meters that would cost to distribute that energy to, and then that services each of our tenants. So I think we agree that it's worth resurrecting that exploration and doing a cost benefit analysis for, and so I think we can prioritize an assessment and conversation with different vendors and then presenting on what our options are and what we recommend.
And what timeline are you looking at?
Well, it's not in this budget here, but we can, we know that it's urgent. We know that it's urgent, so we can prioritize it for FY26,
Please.
but we definitely want to compare it against other priorities that the building, this old girl is in need of. So we're mindful of all of the things, but we will prioritize it, and so we can add a budget item in our
I
capital.
guess because we're looking at the cost effectiveness of having that, so in the long run, we will outright own the system. And there's a little, I guess you could say, profit we'll be making as we, for our tenants that will be here, and knowing that we're going to be saving money, but also we do want to pass the savings on, we do want to make money as well. And at the same time, with the solar being installed here, it is going to bring everything down. I mean, we got to be energy conscious as well. And by showing that we're going to move it forward in this budget, it'll be amazing, so that we can move and see things happening here on our property. And I have a feeling we'd have more people to come, especially if it's got covered parking out there, regarding our solar setup. So I've already spoken with others, and I'd like to share it, or if not, pass them on to you, so that you can meet with them, as they have shared with me many things that would benefit us and not at much of a cost expense to us. So and I'll let you guys know more about that later. Go ahead.
So if we want to add a line item into the budget to contract an electrical engineering firm, do a current site assessment of this entire building and potential infrastructure needs and improvements, what it would cost, project it out over a certain amount of years to see what that cost benefit analysis would be. Would that be in this budget, or not this biennium budget, in your budget, or in the ops budget? It would be in your budget. So maybe get back to us on what that specific line item would be, what that estimate would be for a firm. I can't imagine it would be that much to do a one-time purchase. Yeah, something that would bring in an engineering firm that could give us a solid idea of what that would cost, the metering, the storage capacity, the capability of the building. You know, even to the degree where we could use and install solar in the parking lot, right? Like other locations that have raised and elevated solar panels. I think that would be helpful. Then we have something that's, you know, from a reputable engineering firm.
We've waited many years for this, and now that we're on that subject, and all of us pretty much, I could safely say, it is needed immediately. We need to incorporate that into our budget.
That's how we would start, is do an overall assessment and then look at the numbers and then present that to the board. So we can put the assessment figure. We wouldn't know the rough order of magnitude to install until we do the assessment, so we wouldn't be able to budget that, but we'll put the assessment into the budget. I would put it under Collier.
Trustee Galutaria.
To the best of our ability, there are native Hawaiian firms out there that perhaps we can take a look at. You know, I don't know whether they got the scale that we need, but certainly we want to give them a chance to play with us. Not play, but you know.
Yes, and I think that speaks to the benefit of having the contracted property manager. What that allows us is this sort of greater flexibility in procurement, procuring for these services. Whereas if we did the procurement for every individual service that they facilitate and provide for us, that the property manager provides, it would be harder for us to be more specific about who we select because of procurement regulations. And so we would propose having that engineering firm and the assessment be subcontracted through our property manager. And we'd be able to guide the selection, offer them a selection of vendors that we'd like them to consider, and they can help, they would procure for that.
I mean, this is kind of getting into the weeds and the second, third, you know, order of effects because of that. But, you know, as we look at our aging vehicular fleet, right, converting those over to electric vehicles, the state has done them, and you see Teslas driving all over the airport. The opportunity to have charging stations here. You can have a third-party vendor that we contract with that has charging stations, so other people can come here and I know parking is limited, so that's an issue, parking stalls, but that is an opportunity to generate revenue. You know, there's very few places to charge EVs on the island,
Very
let alone
much.
our own fleet that we should look at. Because that saves on fuel costs, it saves on maintenance.
Or
So,
overhead?
yeah, I think that would be a really good comprehensive study for.
Yeah,
this
I
upcoming
agree.
fiscal
And I
year.
think that we'll definitely work with you folks to help scope that assessment. Also keeping in mind what our long-term development projects are. So if we're gonna redevelop this property, we wanna weigh the cost, benefit of putting in this investment of improvement and when we would start to develop. And those investments maybe are not valuable anymore or would have to be addressed. So that'll be incorporated into the assessment as well. Okay.
Trustee Souza?
Well, Madam Chair, sorry we're going down this road. We'll plan this out for a future ILM meeting so we can dive deeper. But I'm interested because are we number one paying market rate, OHA? And you know, conversations we're having currently about hybrid work, telework, potentially vacating some spaces on our level here. Yeah, and especially the CEO's office we talked about yesterday,
Yeah.
and bringing her down here. Is there a potential for us to be making more money here? As we talk about leasing a lot L and other properties and maximizing the potential, I'm assuming we're not maximizing the potential. And is our rate based on the square footage that we're occupying currently? Okay, but I mean, I'm assuming from, it kind of dates back to the time where this agreement never changed. This budget never changed, right, for our rent. And we've been paying this since we assumed the loan. Is that correct?
The same rate.
Yeah, the same rate, that $1 million or whatever we've been budgeting.
Your base rent escalates 3% every year. That's industry standard best practice.
Yeah.
That's what I offer to all of our tenants. So your base rent does increase 3% and you are just below market. I would say with the build out, you might be right at market because you guys do have a very lovely build out in your space. So you're pretty close to it. You're not, I'm not cutting you any deals.
Right,
And
right. No, no. No, but I mean, in the future, this place she needs a lot of TLC, right? Nalamakuku needs a lot of TLC, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, we could maximize the potential with our other tenants as well. I mean, doing those improvements and getting those quotes. So yeah, I think that's definitely priority. And this is our home. Want to make sure this is taken care of first when we welcome everybody here.
Right.
To be top shape.
Yeah.
So mahalo. Thank you.
Take care of your house first. Trustee Kina?
Well, I think this has been a valuable conversation, although it's tasked our team with a lot of urgent work. And
About time.
I think we're in a phase with this property where we're going to have this conversation over and over. We will discover more urgent projects that have to be done, and we will also look at ways of optimizing everything from the revenue production to the value of this current property. And so we need to have a discussion about the vision of this property, whether we want to maintain and optimize it and invest more, or whether the future of this property is maybe to get rid of the property or to develop it in a different way altogether. And so we're in between the short term and the long term. I don't think our venue today is for talking about the long term, but I'd be interested in knowing where we will do that and how we can start forming that vision. We should have a master plan.
You want us to head that up, trustee?
I'd be glad to work with the team on that.
Get your team going, yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to consider, you know, an ad hoc or a PIG or something that works with the transit-oriented development group, move Honolulu forward, right? Council and Cook, the other stakeholders and partners in this area. What is the future of this, our entire footprint here in the Iwile area? So, yeah,
We have
great
the
point.
rail coming through, so that's going to increase our property values right there.
Right.
And I just want to save us money with that overhead on the solar. That's the priority.
We have had a group created previously to discuss the various properties, and that was more than a couple years ago, but something to revisit.
Yeah.
I have another question regarding the above windows.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain to us what those retractable metal
yes.
pieces are, or and if
Looks like it opens.
the
the
last time
window.
they've been in use and or if they're working at all?
No, it's like that when I got here. I can tell from the mechanics of it, it is a full
Open the window.
gear that opens the windows
Windows,
all at
yeah.
once. Yeah. But please don't do that because we'll really have some roof leaks. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. But don't get me started on that.
Yeah, no, that looks like it does open the windows.
During the break, let's go turn the crank and see.
Who wants to climb up there? Right. Well, I think all of what we're discussing is long overdue, and we've got to address that immediately rather than just table it and move on, especially in this area of energy. And if we're being mindful of what our place is going to look like, it has to start from the energy efficiency of our agency. Is showing as not only that, but also as an example to our beneficiaries that we are being mindful. And so they know that we are doing everything possible to bring costs down, but also to thrive at the highest level and being able to make money. And I think that's another idea, avenue which we need to explore is constant about bringing in revenue for OHA.
Chair, one more
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
What
Kai.
is the difference in $20,000 for commissions? Line 5323 and 5329.
What page are you on?
Page 87, first, line in the Nalama Kukui budget table is estimating 65K for commissions for FY 26, but in FY 27, it's 45?
Yeah, it's based on your upcoming renewals, spaces that are going to be upcoming for new lease negotiations and renewing their terms, or possibly if a tenant decides not to renew, come in and we lease to somebody else. But these are your expiring spaces. Yeah. So we base the commissions based on what we plan on renewing, what we know we're going to have to lease, and what our obviously highest use max rate on. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to Honolulu Harbor Shops.
Okay, this might be our last slide.
Yeah. I
If we
think it is.
can. Next slide, please. Okay, and so our most recently acquired properties, Honolulu Harbor Shops, where Ross CVS used to be and PetSmart are now. As you can see, same framework of expense categories, different proportion. And we can speak to this if you have specific questions, but I'll just kind of roughly speak to Iwilei Business Center. These are projections of expenses based on a fully leased space as well. So all of our budgets are projected based on that assumption.
The Sumner budget is over.
The Honolulu Harbor Shops?
Honolulu Harbor Shops is 500 North Nimitz and Iwilei Business Center is 501 Sumner. Yeah.
Only live in the tables.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
It is Sumner. Yep, Sumner. Yes.
Trustee Akaka?
Hello. To touch on what Trustee Hele had mentioned earlier regarding solar power usage and charging stations and so forth. One thought is to have it where if we know for sure that we're not going to be expanding or building that specific property out of all of our commercial properties in the near future, I think we could explore having what was it that you called it? The person that looks over the property to do an assessment.
Well, You mean like an electrical engineer or like
Ye-
a firm?
Yeah, a consulting firm
Yeah.
to look at that property to see the solar capabilities there on the roofing and the parking and to offer the charging stations there. I think that would be an asset there, given that there are various places of charging, but they're often where people have to wait in line, or there's certain shopping centers or a shopping center that they often have ones that are not in use for whatever reason, and it's a high demand. But on top of that, given the location and so forth, I think we would need to up our security, as we've seen throughout the country that there has been vandalism and damage purposely done to charging stations for various reasons. But for us to explore what that would look like, cost benefit analysis. Mahalo.
Okay, mahalo. Really quick, we kind of go backwards just a little bit because now to answer your question, we have Royce here. Royce, would you mind coming up and explaining to Trustee Akaka of your creative ways in which to block the sun?
Like through tent?
Short.
Oh, okay. Well, looking at the way we're positioned, I think a short-term fast would be to tint. Now, I don't know how it will affect Leanne's ceiling because she has to reseal it and then all of that outside part will get redone. So I think maybe if it's possible, if we could maybe tint the inside to at least give a little bit more of coverage from the sun.
And that would be just OHA versus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just for this area, that's all I care about.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I think someone has their mic on.
Thank you. Mahalo for those thoughts. I think that internally we can look at versus the external big cost for the short term. Pohai also sent an email during this meeting I saw recommending maybe Native Hawaiian designer where they might provide some
Rails.
draping. But I think that maybe instead of just looking at an angle, we can look at just specifically in this above area where it's retractable to have some kind of draping that is not at such a high cost.
Unattractive.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
Aesthetically okay.
Pleasing.
But something that we can look at in the very, very near future, something that this area.
She means immediate future,
Oh yeah,
not very immediate.
incredibly immediate. Yes.
Probably 26, but he could, Royce could maybe include some of that in the budget, but I do advise that we come up with a solution that would be us as tenant, you know, that we could at a much better cost.
Sure, of course.
And then I just want to raise again, like if telework does become ratified, I mean, there will be decreased, presence here. So I think going do it as tenant route would be, save us money.
Okay.
Yeah, but he'll update to include costs for that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, where were we now? I'm sorry to interrupt that, but I just saw him, so I had to bring him in. Okay, gotta take advantage while he's here. Okay, so continue on. Where were we? We're still in Honolulu or Iwilei? Oh, we're on Sumner. Okay.
We were talking about, or Trustee Akaka had the IBC parking, charging stations and the like.
Oh, okay. Okay, so she was playing off of him.
Okay.
707 and 5716. No commissions for 2027?
Not if I lease it out in 2026. Yeah, that's our best rate. That's our best rate. And that's again, if they do a longer term where the scale is up higher and it's a total of about 3 months rent. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Legal determination of the leasing restrictions and highest best use that we're, I know we're working on that, right? Where are we with that? Sorry, I gotta turn on my microphone.
Oh,
It's Scotty's.
Well, right now.
It's
that's right.
on already.
Oh, it's on.
It goes
Okay. After.
I think there was some confusion about which procurement method we would use originally, but the procurement has been initiated and we can potentially expect to execute a contract within the next couple weeks. And then we're requesting in the criteria a pretty short turnaround time
Okay. Okay, so we should know,
before the end of the fiscal.
basically,
Yeah.
putting a different set of legal eyes on the contract and giving us another opinion on
Mhm.
what you can do with that property.
Yeah, and in addition to that, other leasing strategies that we're employing and contract approaches, agreement approaches to protect us a little bit better.
Yeah, and I would also say too, when they're looking at that, that entire property for leasing and some of the covenant restrictions that may or may not exist, with the other tenants we have here. Also the parking, issue as well, right? The currently enclosed parking lot that we have, and, cause there's, how many stalls we have in there? About 50 or so potential OHA stalls that we could utilize.
If OHA wants to be a tenant of the Evile Business Center, we can arrange that, but none of the stalls when leased are available to us to occupy.
leased.
When leased, yeah.
Okay. We could lease our own stalls then.
You absolutely
rather
could,
than
and we
leasing
welcome that.
Full cannery stalls.
Yes,
Just paid for our electrical engineer right there.
yeah. How much? Bigger one? You could technically use your apartment 1 parking while the warehouse is not leased. Apartment 1 and 3A kind of go hand in hand. That's the parking for the warehouse. Apartment 2, you cannot touch. That's 69 dedicated stalls to the Honolulu Harbor Shops, and that's part of all 3 of those leases. That is their parking.
But I guess if we're gonna have a resolution to this whole leasing issue, hopefully have it leased out along with our Lot L in Kaka'ako by the end of this year, that'd be great.
Mhm.
That's like major revenue generation. That's just sitting on a table. Non-income producing. Great, okay, thanks.
Trustee Akaka?
Mahalo. Regarding the parking, whether it's close to site, kind of off site, another concern I have is regarding the safety of those that are walking and how we would revisit that in terms of what the situation is on the sidewalks and so forth, and how that works with HPD and overall management.
So technically, the sidewalks are not ours to police. Even our own building security can only patrol and manage up to the perimeter of the property. However, there are certain ordinances that are in place that, like no camping, no lying, no sitting. So we have hung signs up, and I have seen, especially in the most recent months, HPD making additional patrols very early in the morning. They're writing tickets, and if you'll notice, it's been quite cleared out over there for the past several months. We've gone to extreme lengths to do everything we can within our power as the property owner. But it's not our property to police, but we have done everything that we possibly can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to add, so that it is the city and they've been doing ongoing SPOs. I believe Colliers regularly request them. In fact, I saw one being done yesterday. And then, so attached to that, this is why we have security. So because we have staff who park at Dole, and so this is Royce's budget, his staff, they do run a shuttle. So we do provide a shuttle in the morning and in the afternoon to take staff over there to get their cars at Dole. After a certain, I think it's 4 o'clock or something, we encourage staff to come, if they're going to stay beyond that time, to come and park here. at Nalamakukui, because those parkings open up, I guess. And then we have the security guard who, you know, as a result of some things that happened this year, he does patrol in the morning and in the afternoon. And, you know, we do offer an escort service. So if someone wants him to walk with them to Dole, he'll do that as well. And those are the, I guess, services available to our staff who are parking out there.
How long has that been in service for, and what is, I'm wondering what the, feel bad saying this, but what is the cost and reason for that? I can guess.
The cost for, well, the reason
Shuttling.
for security, because earlier this year, we did have an incident where, we did have an incident involving, you know, homeless out on the street and our staff. And so the shuttle was something that was in place before.
With Kakako.
Well, here, yeah. And then
Yeah.
also Dole, but, because of, you know, low ridership, they phased it out. But after the incidents, we restarted the shuttle. So that's us. That's our staff using our OHA vehicle, the shuttle that happens. And then security, that's all wrapped up in our security contract, which we talked about on Monday. Yeah. And so, you know, I think our, you know, OHA is we're doing what we can. We also, you know, tell people maka'ala, use good judgment.
You have anything for
If
Sumner?
if something, you know, have a friend or a partner that you're walking with. So we are making efforts to at least create safety for our staff. And then I think Colliers, we've had a couple of meetings with them. Leanne is our POC, and she's also on our health and safety committee. But they've been, you know, making lots of really great efforts to do the same.
I can also add that if we do elect to move forward with telework, even if it's a hybrid where there's half the staff here on this day and half the staff here on the following day, if you can do that, we can accommodate all of your staff parking here at Nalamakakui.
Amen. Go ahead, Kaheli.
You know, just, it's not my question, but just as a follow-up to that, what is our contract with Dole and the 33 stalls and the key cards and all that? Is that a month to month that basically if we don't fund it in this budget, that come 1 July, we better have a plan to put into place? Or do we have a commitment with
I think
Dole Cannery?
so. I'm not sure if it's monthly or I think it's over a year, but I do want to say that I have talked with Royce about not completely eliminating the Dole parking budget, because this is going to take some coordination, right? So we envision a shared parking program where, like, you know, maybe on my 2 days, you know, that I'm here, I get the stall. On her 3 days, she gets it. However, that's going to take some time and coordination, like figuring out what people's telework schedules are going to be, and, you know, how you how you assign and co-share, I guess, parking spaces. So we would like to at least keep it for the first quarter, give us a little bit of time to figure out all that coordination on parking. And then the other thing that we have been discussing is when, you know, if we do move forward with an all-in OHA day where we want everybody to be present, right? You can have your face-to-face, as well as agency-wide events. So, you know, I like wondering, can we use those stalls back there? Or so those are some of the details that we have to figure out. But I think at least Royce can talk to what our contract is with Dole.
Right, go ahead.
So our contract is up June 30th. Perfect. So right now we're looking at extending it for the first 3 months into quarter one. And then after that, we'll revisit to see if telework is a complete workaround or if we're gonna actually come all back to office. But right now we're extending that one and the one that we have for on property. I think that one is up June 30th also.
Well, telework will come before the board for second reading on
Yes.
May 29th.
Next
And
week.
based on the almost unanimous support, we should be in the planning already, right, for that.
Exactly.
But, yeah, I hear what you're saying. You know, I'd also say that more than likely on a daily basis, even though we're paying for 33 stalls, not every person is using that stall.
Exactly.
So we're basically spending money on vacant spaces. And this is something that in the PIA discussions I've had was an issue with employees. And I wasn't here a few years ago, but people lost their parking stalls that were here a lot longer than others that were hired here and were basically ordered to move their stalls to another location. And it was a point of contention for employees that worked here and wasn't understanding why they were losing their stall. I don't know if it was pre-COVID, return to work, what happened, but parking's an issue. Well, that's why we love talking about it. Yeah.
So it is an issue, and that's
Yeah.
something that when I came on board, I was also informed about. So it's a combined HR operation. So it is something, I think with the telework too happening, positive presupposition here. It is gonna give us an opportunity to kind of open that up. I agree, there's lots that are empty a lot. I think so we gotta like huddle up with HR as well as ops and figure out what is our parking procedures. But our hope is that, because you know, we use more than 33 stalls here, but is that we will have sufficient parking to accommodate all of our staff. But yeah, I just being honest, there's some cleanup that has to happen with,
Absolutely.
you know, determining parking. But again, I think some of that might fizzle away with telework.
Go ahead, Akaka.
Mahalo. Wanting to revisit Kakakamakai and our Nalamakukui properties here. So in parking, what has happened with the area in Kakakamakai that we used to use as parking, and we've had people shuttled to and from?
Yeah, no. It's very similar.
I leased it out.
So it's not-
Okay.
It's not available, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good revenue, yeah.
And then with regarding Nalamakukui, I personally have experience where I'm trying to come onto property for work things on the weekend or in certain hours, and I don't have access to that, and I was not provided a key. So can that be provided to the trustees so that if that need arises, that we have access to the property?
We're getting a nod from Rice.
Thank
Yes.
you. Good here. So for instance, if I'm coming here on the weekend or in the evening, I have to check with security or call the restaurant to let me in so I can come up here.
Oh, wow.
We actually,
Yeah, into the
so
building.
into the building, OHA actually has a lockbox up
Yeah,
front.
but we're not
I'll get
provided
you
that
that code.
information.
We can share that, I believe. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. But just getting into, I've had to have call the restaurant to let me in.
I'm sorry about that. You
Yeah.
should have had the code to that lockbox. I'm happy to walk you down there, show it to you and give you the code, and that goes.
So
for
May,
all of
did you
you.
walk in from the side or you just couldn't get in at all and
But I
anywhere?
tried from this, looking for the security guard, calling the restaurant.
Oh, okay.
It's,
I'll happy to show you all where it's located
Thank
and
you.
the code, and you have access to your building whenever you want. I do know that we do keep the perimeter locked when it's
Yes,
not
I
during
noticed that.
normal business hours, but there is a lockbox at the front glass door next to where security podium is, and
yes.
I can
I
provide
see
that
it, but
information for
yeah,
you.
not having that information has been
No, you should have
challenging.
that. We
Thank
can take
you.
care of that very easy.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes, please. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm just
Go ahead, Kai.
questions. Maybe it's Ramona. But yeah, same kind of question on Alama, because how much, there's like CPB, is who the loan is with, how much years left, in the maturity of the loan, any idea how much, we owe on this particular loan?
And I just want to correct what I said earlier, on the Nalamakukui loan, it's a 10-year loan and it's for 25 million. And for this loan for the Ivalay property, it's also a 10-year loan And we just started paying principal and interest after 3 years. And so there's 7 years left, and the loan balance or the loan amount was 35 million. Yeah, for the 2 years.
These are all principal and interest right now. You mentioned the balloon payment on the first loan. So we don't really have to, it's not concerning for us yet. I mean, obviously, we don't want to make a big balloon payment at some point, so we would look at refinancing again, probably.
Yes, using other people's money is always better, yeah.
Yeah. So 35 million left. That's with CPB? Okay. Okay. I got my last question, but are you almost done?
Yeah,
We're almost done?
we're down to the last one.
Wow.
Late.
No. No. No, you know what? I just want to say, mahalo, Laurie, and your team.
Yes. that's
You,
quite fun.
you kind of know, I think everyone knows how I feel about interim positions. And you've been filling that role for a while, going back and forth between Big Island, like myself, and covering multiple divisions. Is there anything that didn't make the cut that you think is really important
Yes.
for us to consider in any of the different hats that you wear in this upcoming fiscal year?
I think definitely staffing is going to be informed, like I mentioned, by the work that our real estate consultant is doing. Unfortunately, that was scheduled beyond this process, and hopefully we can get a better idea of maybe what FTEs we're gonna want to add at some point in the next biennium, before this budget process is done. That I think is my number one. I think the work, and mahalo to this board and for supporting the contracting of this real estate consultant, because I think the optimization of real estate is super important to our organization and to our beneficiaries and our fiduciary duty to malama our assets at the highest standard. And so that's going to impact, I think, the whole organization. And so the work that our real estate consultant is doing is current improvements that you guys have afforded us. And so mahalo to that. I think the next improvement is going to be restaffing, reorganizing this department so that we can meet the standard that we're trying to meet operationally and performance wise.
Yeah, that's a chair. That's a
Mhm.
trend through every single
Every
PIA.
department, right.
Every presentation we've had is staffing
Right.
and key positions that need to be filled.
Mhm.
And that's going to be a heavy lift in this next quarter. I don't think a 4-person, 5-person HR team is capable
Mm.
of all the position descriptions, all the interviews, all the vetting of potential candidates that need to be done in such a short period of time, the onboarding, all of that. We need to have another strategy, how to attack that. Because come 1 July, this board is going to look to the administration to execute on the things that we've funded, and it's going to be all hands on deck. We don't want to be like one of our other meetings where we're coming back a year later and being like, how come that was never executed?
Right.
So that's a trend through every meeting. And that's why that personnel and fringe category is so important. So I would rather you plan for what you need and let's modify those numbers. So when it comes back to us on June 2nd, it's what we need to get the type of quality people here to do that work. And let us worry about all the recruitment and incentives and putting those things together so we can get, and there are really good people out there.
We agree.
And we just need to get them here and show them why OHA is the best place to work right now.
I think maybe this isn't necessarily incentive, but it could be for the individual. Our properties are across the Pai'aina, and so if we are open to 4 Waukele, we've sought staffing from Hawaii Island because it's specific to that aina. Each of the employees that hold the position title should be able to support across that program, so they aren't exclusively responsible for that island or that property.
Right.
But if we can expand and seek from elsewhere, I think this probably is true because our beneficiaries are across the Pai'aina. It's probably true for all programs, but I think that is something that we could widen our pool of candidates if we're able to hire from outer islands, especially, I mean, to me, it's proportionate to the size of our portfolio, our land portfolio. If we expand here on this island, maybe more staffing here, but if we expand across the Pai'aina, then probably we want bodies at those places, and it will cut down on travel expenses, and for our staffing that are primarily here or on Hawaii Island, that would be one consideration.
Nice. Oh, I like that. Thank you so much for that. It's great to hear all of this information that we have not been privy to. So it opens up our eyes as well to see what is needed. And obviously, as Chair Kelly had mentioned, we're so understaffed in Taipaina. So let's get taken care of that first. I think we save it to Trustee Galutaria.
Just one last thought, and I
Sure.
know we're wrapping up, and
Yep, we are.
again, I join with all of my colleagues to thank you folks for your work. And to understand that I think what you're looking at is a board that is, I think we want to move into an acquisition mode sooner than later. Now's the time. And under the leadership of, Chair Souza, Chair Kahele, and then with your hard work, that's where we want to be in this next fiscal, moving forward boldly. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Mahalo. Are we all good? Anything else? It is time to eat. This time, people, I'd like to end our discussion and call for recess for tomorrow, Thursday, May 22nd. The presentations will be on D, and that's going to be about with their OHA Administration budget briefings for the proposed biennium budget. And this is going to cover the areas of strategy and implementation. So the SNI team is going to be here tomorrow, as well as the strategic directions that they're going to talk about for education pathways, economic resilience. Boy, do we need that. Health outcomes and quality housing. Looking forward to tomorrow's presentation.